Hey guys, welcome back to the Doremicom channel. I'm sitting here and I'm just realizing what a huge project a 6x8 Apoc table is going to be. We're talking about a double-decker Apoc table, so I'm going to go through and kind of show you kind of some of the design elements that that I've been considering for the terrain itself. First off, let's start off with a box to represent the 6x8 table. Now, we aren't going to put an entire second table on top of the first table, because if you do, with it being 6x8 feet, you'll never be able to reach and move the guys that are in the middle. So, for the concept on my end, what I've decided is that the base table is basically a planet that's just been so badly polluted or disgusting, or, you know, something to the effect that it's like a Nurgle paradise, that the Imperial Guard have decided to build these towers, these structures, up from the planet's surface in order to maintain the planet as a military base. So we start going into this concept where we have a series of towers that rise above the table, and we're going to introduce bridges that fall in between. Now, in order to kind of improve playability, I think it's going to have to actually do more bridge work than we were intending, and in order to have terrain that can actually be populated with buildings and whatnot, these are actually going to be slightly larger. Now, the concept behind this is actually more tricky than it sounds, because what I really wanted to do was not do bridges here and here so that people could kind of lean over the table and grab, you know, a squad of Space Marines that they needed to move forward on the base table. If we introduce all these bridges, it's going to make it difficult. But to get around that, I've decided I'm going to try to make the bridges magnetized. Now, these are all just like high-level ideas on what I'm hoping to do. I really don't know if this is going to end up being the final notion of how I'm going to develop my table. But what I'd also like to do is have the top layer be a little bit higher. So if we were to look straight at this table, this is kind of what we would see, where you have a couple layers of foam that would actually end up being the ground itself for these raised platforms. Probably going to have to introduce some sort of harder material than foam that will jut out just slightly wherever the bridges connect. Put some rare earth magnets there so that the bridges will effectively lie on top and be supported by whatever the material that we use here underneath the foam core here. So it'll be a slight step down between the platforms and the bridges. Underneath the sturdy material, I don't know what I'm going to use yet, I was thinking that we could introduce some PVC piping as the main support structure for the middle, and maybe some smaller piping to the one side or the other. Maybe introduce a couple of less support structure but more of a decorative looking series of pipes that kind of runs down this way. The whole notion being that the IG that have populated the top part of these structures are actually just using the planet's surface as a big trash can, and they're just sending all their pollution and garbage down these chutes and throwing it down there because they don't care. Pretty much the planet underneath them is dead anyways. There'll be some sort of polystyrene connection here, and probably another layer that these pipes will go into, that'll be glued to the bottom of the, I don't know, I probably should come up with what this is. I just don't know what I'm going to need. Some of the difficulties that I'm dealing with are weight. The other thing is that I want it to be sturdy enough, but I also want to make sure that whatever we use here isn't so difficult to get polystyrene to be glued down to it. So it might have to be a slightly porous surface. Slightly porous surface. Now, here's the other trick. If we're introducing bridges in between these platforms, we're also going to have to do it in such a way that if there's a metal old school lictor sitting on the bridge, we don't want the bridge to break, hence the reason we need to put something sturdier than the polystyrene underneath it. We also don't want the fact that the lictor is here for this pillar or this pillar to fall inward. We also have to make sure that if there are some guys that are on the planet's surface, you know, fighting the good fight down below, we may have an issue where we have to pick up the bridge as a whole up and off the platform. So wherever we end up magnetizing it to one another has to be sturdy enough that we can remove the bridge without causing the magnets to pop out of either the bridge or the pillar. There's a lot of really tricky requirements with this terrain, and so this is just some initial concept designs of where I'm headed with this. I'm thinking, like I said, that by introducing magnetized bridges, that we're going to allow for the playability on the planet's surface to still be usable. So stay tuned, guys. Once I get some supplies and start taking a look at what it's going to take to actually make this happen, we will have more updates.